Hey guys, it's Professor Cruz again, and I just wanted to come and make another video for Module 4. I hope you guys have been finding these videos helpful. I enjoy making them for you guys to kind of give you a little bit of extra information about what my expectations are each week. Um, just a little administrative note, I'm working on your grading for your Module 2 drop boxes, so that'll be coming up as they into your grade book as I get them completed. And then obviously after you guys can complete your reply posts Sunday for module 3, then I'll get a start on grading those as well. Remember, if you get a 1 in your grade book, that means you still have something you need to do before I grade it. So please check that feedback and see what I'm asking you to do. As you see the module 2 Dropbox assignments coming through, you'll see certain things on the markup um, on your sheet, because basically I download your paper into a markup program on my iPad. I write comments and stuff directly on the paper, and then I post it back into your gradebook as a file. It'll say, please see attached file for feedback. You click the little blue link and it'll open a PDF and you'll have my commentary. So a couple things I want to point out to you about that. When you see an assignment and it has something highlighted in yellow, that's something I think you either did good or something I personally liked about the assignment. If you see something highlighted in green, that's something I'm trying to draw your attention to, usually some sort of technical grading thing or something that you missed. And then the purple stuff, like in handwriting, is my just basic commentary on the paper. And if you see any these like purple comment boxes, they'll have little numbers associated with them. If you scroll all the way down to the very last page of the PDF, those are like more detailed comments that are typed out. I don't necessarily like have room to put on the paper itself. So you guys definitely want to utilize that feedback. I try my best to give you as much feedback as possible to help you improve in the process, or at least know what you did well. If you have any questions about your feedback once it's posted, please feel free to reach out to me and ask, and I'll be happy to explain it to you. Okay. But yes, keep that in mind that you're going to have to click that link and then you go through and you see what's on there. That's why on the Dropbox assignments, I have you put your rubric on there, because I can't add sheets, to that PDF when I'm marking it up. So I can just fill that out by hand to let you know what your points were. And like when we have discussion board assignments like we had last week, I just fill out the rubric and post it into your grade book. Okay. So keep an eye out for that stuff. It's coming and it's going to help you out. Okay. Now, this week, what I want to do, I really want to get into not just the assignment, but give you some background content information, like a little, mini lecture, if you will, to help you, because I think this project that we're going to do for the next 4 weeks, I think it's really insightful into how the critical thinking process works from ethical frameworks. But it can also be a lot to try to do on your own. The next 4 assignments are interrelated. We're going to be doing 4 assignments for 1 case study to work our way through the 7 steps of the critical thinking model that you'll read about in chapter 4. It's I enjoy breaking this up into 4 assignments, as some other professors do, because it allows us to kind of make some changes and adjustments as we go along. It's going to be very important for you, 1, not to miss this assignment this week, and 2, to view my feedback. I'll get you feedback as fast as I can on this assignment, because you might need to make some changes before you do next week's assignment. This is why reading your feedback is important, because if I ask you to make a change to something on this week's assignment and you don't, you're going to lose points just for that on the next one, but it's also going to throw off your application process of the ethical framework. And that's going to make a little more sense in a minute when we start talking about it. But my point is these 4 are interrelated, they get connected, so it's important to stay on top of all of them to see this process all the way through. We do this kind of instead of just giving it as one big paper where you have to do it in like a one shot, and then there's the potential to maybe like miss some things or have a problem in the first section that carries all the way through to the end. and kind of tanks your application of the paper, okay? So hopefully that'll make a little more sense for you guys as I explain it here. But if you bear with me here, I'm going to show you the case we're using. I'm going to show you the assignment, and then I'm going to give you some information that I usually like present in my face-to-face classes that I think are going to help you guys out with this process, okay? So give me a little second here, get my screen share. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're in module 4. The layout's basically the same. I'm not going to go through it like, in detail. Obviously, you guys should know how this thing's working by now. We've done 3 of these, but just kind of follow through the checklist, make sure you get your quiz done. What I want to draw your attention to first is this, the till death do my part case. Okay, it says, please thoroughly read through this case study and use it as a basis of for the Dropbox assignment. This is the case that you're required to use for your assignments. If you use any other case, if you make up any case, you're going to get a 0. I don't know why this happens, but every semester somebody just skips over this and makes up their own case study, and it's not what we're going for here. I'm giving you guys, I know you guys don't see each other because we're online, but I'm giving all 30 of you the same case. But what's really kind of cool is I'm going to get different applications of this based on each individual person. But we're going to see as a whole how the class kind of responds to this. Now, in the final assignment, you guys will be posting the decisions you made on a discussion board for each of you to look at and kind of talk about. So you will eventually see how other people handled this application. That's what's pretty cool. We're all going to do the same thing, and we're going to get like slight variations on it. So just, click on this document here, and this is the case. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to read through this. And I recommend reading through it a couple times. I would usually read this probably about 3 times. The first time just to see what's going on. The second time to start picking out the important elements. And the third time just to make sure you didn't miss anything. Sounds like a lot, but it's like a page and a half. Because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to read through here. You're going to want to focus on what the central ethical issue is, the main moral issue, like we did in our module 2 Dropbox. You're going to want to think about who's the decision maker, like who's the person that has to decide to do something here. And then, what decisions they can possibly make, who the affected stakeholders would be. So you really want to analyze this pretty thoroughly. Okay, but one tip I'd give you about when you're trying to find your stakeholders, anybody who's mentioned by name or any entity that would represent people that's mentioned, I'd go ahead and highlight that. Those are going to be stakeholders, okay? There's a reason why they're mentioned in the case, and that's because they've got some sort of investment in the outcome. So read through your case a bunch of times, like I said, get comfortable with it, print it out, have it next to you, take notes on it, whatever you want to do. But this is the starting point, okay, for our assignment. Now, once you've read the case, okay, then you'll see the assignment instructions. And it's a lot, and I want you to read through this, but I'm going to kind of break down pieces of it for you. But I do recommend not just going off of the one thing I said, but read through the instructions again multiple times and make sure you're hitting them. Because I'll tell you, one of the biggest pieces of feedback I could give the class in general is we're not paying particular close attention to the instructions. You guys are missing these little minute things, from the instructions, but they're starting to add up when you miss enough of them. So make sure you double check with the instructions before you submit. So the way I always did this as a student, I'd read the instructions a couple times. I would create my document, and before I submitted my assignment, I would actually go through and I would put the instructions and the assignment right next to each other, and I would go through and I would checklist in my paper everything that was, in the instructions that I was supposed to do, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And you'd be surprised how often I caught something that would have cost me points that I missed. So definitely utilize these instructions, not just to get started, but through the process and then before you actually submit. So for this assignment, we're going to focus on the case study, which I showed you, in the first three steps of the critical thinking process, which is identification, research, and analysis. So it's reminding you here to, read the case, and it's telling you to use full APA formatting, which I'm going to show you. I've given you guys a thing to use, like something to download and use for this assignment to make it easier for yourself. And I'll show you that in a minute. But what it's asking you to do is list 5 secondary ethical issues, which we'll talk about in a minute, because those aren't really in the textbook. That's something I'm going to ask you to do, and it'll make sense when I do that. And then you're going to list the central ethical issue. We did this, remember, in module 2, you summarized your article you found, and then you stated a should or what should statement at the end in bold. We were practicing for this, okay? So we're going to do that same kind of thing here. Obviously, there's no Bob in yours. I just did that as a placeholder, but you'd be surprised how many people just write the word Bob in there because they're not critically thinking for themselves. They're just, well, it says Bob, I'll put Bob. There's no Bob, okay? It's just there to show you an example, okay? So state the central ethical issue, okay? And then, it talks about how to do that fairly. Then research. Now, this is going to look scary. I'm not asking you to actually do research. I'm actually asking you to have a numbered list of 3 things that you would research, and then 3 to 4 sentences about, meaning if you were the decision maker, and then 3 to 4 things that are sentences that says like where they would find this information, what they would learn from it, and how it would help them, in the decision-making process. Remember, it's not about you, so don't write I, me, we, us, our. Don't say I would look at this, I would look at that. Say the decision maker would look at this, okay, or that, because you're not going to be the decision maker because it's not about you, right? Then in the analysis chart here, it talks about how to set this up, and I'll show you an example in a minute, but essentially what you're looking to do is you want to identify your decision maker, the person that has to make a decision, and then you want to have 4 options that the decision maker could take to answer that should question that you laid out. Now, this is very important. They have to be within the direct control of your decision maker. It can't be somebody else's, action, because it's what are 4 separate things that this person can do. And I understand it's going to be a little bit difficult because you'll find like the first 2, maybe 3 easily, and then you're trying to think of that 4th option. But the idea is to really think this thing fully through and see like what all could be done to address this issue. Does that make sense? So like if you think back to like, remember chapter 1, we talked about Dr. King. Like if I was using Dr. King as in that Birmingham situation as a case study, I would say something like, should Dr. King break the parade law? And then my obviously at this point now my decision maker is implied by the question. I'm saying, should Dr. King do something? So Dr. King's going to be my decision maker. And then what could he do? Well, he could break the law. He could not break the law and not go speak. He could give the speech, in a private area where he can't be restricted from speaking, or he could, petition, to the state court or something like that to get the rule overturned. 4 different things that he can do to address that issue. Now, in that case, we already knew what he did. He broke the law, but this is like we're inserting ourselves at the point of where the decision was about to be made. Like what's the question he should have asked, and what are some options he could have thought about pursuing, okay? So make sure you follow these instructions on that. 4 things the decision maker can do. And what you're going to need here is a chart. And this tells you how to make a chart in Microsoft Word. But if you just use what I've laid out for you, it's already got a chart in it, okay? And it tells you about how to expand the chart depending on how many stakeholders you have, okay? And so you'll have a chart where it has options across the top and a people affected down the side. And then definitely follow through with this checklist. A lot of people aren't working their way through these checklists. Remember, when you can answer everything yes, it's ready to turn in. People are still writing second person you. Your assignments aren't about me. When you write you, you're talking directly to me. And like, no offense, I teach you about the theories, you don't teach me, right? That's kind of like the joke I tell my students. It's like, don't quit preaching at me, okay? And it's not about you because you're not involved in this particular case, right? So the only time you write in first person is when I've asked you to give a reflection or directly give your opinion, and you don't need that in this assignment, okay? So just make sure everything is laid out. It asks you if the rubric's on the last page. The rubric's part of this document I'm going to show you. So as long as you use the document, you're going to be in good shape. So if you come right up here between the case study and the assignment instructions, you'll see a sample format, identification, research, and analysis. And you want to go ahead and you want to download that into Microsoft Word. And then we have it right there. Okay, so people don't download it in Microsoft Word, they copy and paste it, and it looks bad. Okay, you're going to lose points. You cannot put it into another program. You cannot submit your assignment in other Mac programs. I don't have Pages on the computer here. I don't have the ability to look at those other kind of things. So you have to download it into Microsoft Word. Okay. And then you go through and you make sure you change your name. You'll be surprised how many, Wolverines I have in my class. These are just placeholders. This is, a comic book hero's real name. Okay. You know what I mean? Don't leave that on there. Pay attention to the little details. Okay. But you'll see the first section, everything's laid out for you. 5 questions, secondary ethical issues. These aren't the largest things that need to be addressed, but there are other like ethical questions and considerations that undergird the larger topic at hand. Now, what's cool about the secondary ethical issues is you can pose these from anybody's perspective. The central ethical issue has to be from the decision maker's perspective, but this can just be 5 general, is it right about the thing? Like we think about Dr. King again. Is it right to enforce a parade law on somebody that hasn't been enforced in years? Is it right to prevent somebody from publicly speaking and using their free speech? Is it right to, disobey laws that you find unjust? We're just asking 5 general, is it right questions. And what this shows me is that you're really thinking through the depth of the problem and everything that has created it. And all you do is just continue writing right here. Leave this, write it out, throw a question mark on the end, and you're good. Now down here, the should statement should be bold, and you just fill in, should Dr. King break the parade law? That's the way you do a should question. You can also do a what should question if you want. What should Dr. King do about the parade law? It's really from whatever perspective that you like, but I like the should question because I think it's more direct, and it also gives you your first 2 options. So you need 4 options. If I say, should Dr. King break the parade law? Well, inherently, we can answer that question with a yes or no, right? We don't know ethically what the right thing to do is yet, but we know that we could answer that with a yes or no, which means my first 2 options are do the thing or don't do the thing. You see what I'm saying? So break the law, like I could say Dr. King should break the law, Dr. King should not break the law. And I've got 2, and I just have to think of 2 more. So I think I like the should question personally because it lays out my first 2 options. But the what should question's fine too. You would just need 4 options to fit in. Then when you come here, you've got your research and you just put a topic under each one. I want you to write the topic here. People oftentimes leave this where it says research topic and then they write under it. If you just leave it where it says research topic 3 times, I'm going to take a point off because I want you to write the topic here. Okay. And then the 3 to 4 sentences explaining where one would look for that information, what they would gain from that information, and how it would help them make a decision in the case. For every sentence you're short, I'm going to take a point off. So you got to have at least 9 sentences here and 3 topics because I want to see that you've thought this through. You don't actually have to do the research. Don't put citations in there. Don't put websites in there. I'm not asking you to do the research because really this would take a lot more time than what we could do in a week if we were going to do that. It's just if this were a real life thing and we needed real life information, where would we go to find it? Okay. And then finally, the important part here is the analysis chart. Okay. So I've got the chart in here already for you guys. So you don't have to worry about making it because it can be a little frustrating to figure this out. And I've seen plenty of times when I was a writing tutor that people spent more time focusing on how to make the chart than what they actually put on the chart. And I mean, I really want the information on the chart is what I'm after here. So I gave you guys the chart. So this is what I said, just use this format and you're good to go. So what you're going to do here, you put your decision makers down, or your stakeholders, I'm sorry, down the left side. Leave them bolded like this so they stick out. Leave the decision maker labeled. If you don't have one that says decision maker, that's going to be a point off because it's important to understand that, okay? But your decision maker needs to be the number one stakeholder. So this is where I'd put like Dr. King or whatever, okay? And then everybody else can go in whatever order you want. I'm telling you right now, you're gonna have more than 4. If you turn in with 4 stakeholders on this assignment, you're gonna lose points because there are a lot more than 4 people named out in this case. So you really want to make sure that you have covered all your bases on finding all your stakeholders. I just have this chart like this, nice and compact, so it fits on here for the display, but I'll show you how to change this in a second, okay? But once we have our stakeholders laid out, we have our decision maker labeled, then we just go in here and we list the decisions that they can make. And I'm going to show you guys a real life example of this in a minute, but you can kind of see. So this would be Dr. King, everybody else in Birmingham situation laid out, and then Dr. King should break the law, Dr. King should not break the law, Dr. King should hold the speech in private, Dr. King could contest the decision at a higher level in the government. Okay. And then what you do in here, you just write out how each person is affected by this decision. So this line across is how is the decision maker affected by this decision? How is this person affected by this decision? And so on and so forth. What you want to use there is the context clues from the case and what we know about these individuals and what they've expressed that they want. And so how they will be affected, good or bad, or even neutral, if you will, by each decision. Now, I don't want you to write me whole paragraphs, but I don't want you to give me 1 or 2 phrases. Give me, or 1 or 2 words, give me enough so I understand exactly what we're asking for here. Okay. Now, when you need to expand your chart, which you will, you'll need to add more. All you have to do is go to the bottom row. I'm hitting the right click button and it brings up this menu. Okay, and then I'm hitting, going to the insert, and I'm going to go rows below. You see, and I can do that multiple times. Right click, insert, rows below. Right click, insert, rows below. You get it? And then as you fill stuff in, it'll expand the boxes like we have here. But I just click and add, okay? This is what this tells you. If you need to add more rows, right click, insert rows below. Omit this, okay? I'm telling you right now, if you don't take that off, I'm going to take a point off because it shows that you're not paying attention, and people leave this on all the time. This is on there for instructions not to be left on the final copy. Anytime you see me add something on one of these documents that has brackets on it, it means I want you to take those off, okay? Your final copy is just on there to give you the guidance when you're doing this, okay? So once you've got that assignment filled out, you go ahead and you turn it in. You put it in the Dropbox when you're happy with it. You'll see there's no reference page here at the bottom, and that's fine because we're not really referencing anything from the textbook this week. The next couple will have the reference citations on them, or because we will actually be borrowing information from the books about theories. So don't sweat having a reference page this week because we're not really referring to anything, okay? And then you'll see we've got the rubric right here on the last page already. So just download the document, fill it out the best you can against that case study, and then turn it in, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to go through a little bit of my presentation here to kind of help you guys out. So this is like a little class lecture, light for you guys just to kind of show what we're doing over the next couple weeks, particularly this week, okay? So as you guys will see in chapter 4, there's 7 steps to this critical thinking process: identification, research, analysis, application, decision-making, evaluation, and reflection. The idea is if you work these 7 steps fully, you should be able to come to a wise ethical decision about any real world problem that we're facing, whether it's a small problem or a major problem. You just have to work these steps accordingly. Why do we work these steps? Because we're trying to avoid the knee-jerk reaction to just, oh, I'm going to do this or I'm going to follow this. Sometimes our instincts and impulses are correct, and other times they're not. The biggest problem I see over the years with this project is people want to decide the right thing to do before we even get started, and that introduces bias into the project. Each step of the way, they're trying to influence the project to be the way they want it to be, or for the outcome to be the way they want it to be. And what I'm asking you to do is put aside your personal assumptions and bias and just work the process, see it through, trust the process, and you might be surprised what the final outcome is based off the 2 ethical theories that we're going to apply throughout this process, okay? So these are our 7 steps. And so what are we trying to identify? We're trying to identify the decision that needs to be made and what the ethical implications are. And so this is what we call the central ethical issue. We've been talking about this a little bit since Module 2. This is the main issue that needs to be addressed. That's what you guys need to find for that should question. Because how do we present it in a should or what should question, okay? So this is where you're going to present that central ethical issue in that proper spot, in that proper format that addresses the biggest thing that needs to be done in our case. So when it comes to research, what are we trying to research? The information the decision maker needs to come up with wise ethical decisions, so options, right? So where do we go to find this information? And how does that information help them in the process? Those are the things that you're going to be writing after you've identified what they should find out, okay? And then how do we analyze the problem? We break the issue down into the smaller parts. So what are the smaller parts? You'll see in the chapter, it's the decision maker, the possible options, the stakeholders, and how people are affected. So before we can make a wise ethical decision, we would need to know all these things. Who's responsible for making the decision? What can they possibly do to solve the problem? And how is that going to affect other people? Now, those first 3 parts are what we're going to do this week. The next 2 weeks, we're going to break step 4 down the application process into 2 different assignments. 1 week, we're going to apply the theory of act utilitarianism, which is a consequential ethical theory you'll learn about in chapter 5. And then the next week, we're going to apply constientology, which is a non-consequential ethical theory, which you'll learn about, I think it's chapter 7. We do 6 and 7 in 1 week. I think it's chapter 7, yeah, Kant's theory. So what are we going to apply? Ethical standards, which are what? They are general moral principles. What are general moral principles? They're the should statements of ethics. So in the beginning, we're asking a should question. What should Dr. King do? Or should Dr. King break the law? Now we're going to make a should statement. According to act utilitarianism, Dr. King should do this. According to constientology, Dr. King should do this. You see, a should question then shifts to a should statement, okay? Because that's what we talk about all the way back in chapter 1. We're making the should statements of ethics, okay? So when we get to the decision-making process, then what are we trying to decide what the morally best option to take is, and then if we're able to justify that decision. And so what are we looking for? Decisions, resolutions, actions. And what do we use to make these? Reason, courage, and character. So this might be hard. We might have to make a hard decision, and that's part of the process. But what we're going to do, we're going to apply act utilitarianism, and we're going to get a decision. And we're going to apply Kant's theory, and we're going to get a decision. They're going to be different, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to pick the one of the two, which are both ethical options, because we used ethical frameworks to get to them, but we can only do one thing in real life, right? So you're going to choose the wisest, most ethical option, and then you're going to explain why you think that is the wisest, most ethical option and defend it, okay? And what are you going to defend it against? You're going to evaluate it, and you're going to defend it against counter arguments. So we want to make sure the decision that we reached is solid and there wasn't any slip ups along the way. So how do we evaluate our decision? We identify counter arguments, and that's what you're going to do in the last assignment. And why is that important? Well, we need to be ready to fairly logically defend our decision against scrutiny. So I'm actually the coach of the ethics debate team, which I may have mentioned before. And if any of you guys are interested in that, you can reach out to me and see what that's all about if you'd like to participate. But I always tell my team, you have to be ready not only for your position, but you have to be ready to defend it against counter arguments. So the best way to do that is think beforehand, what could somebody say against my decision, and how would I defend it? It's better in the moment when you're prepared to overcome an objection than try to think on the spot how to defend your position against that objection. So we like to identify counter arguments and think about what would we say to defend our position in that situation. And then finally, we're going to reflect. And so what do we reflect upon? We want to step back and look at the process and make sure we formed our decisions objectively and as honestly as possible. What do we want to identify? Strengths and weaknesses in our own thinking in the process. And then did our personal assumptions, values influence the decision? The hardest thing you're going to have to do in this case is fight off your own personal bias, your own personal beliefs, your own personal values. And I'm not saying that those aren't valid, but that what we're trying to do is we're trying to see what two specific ethical theories would compel us to do. And if we put our bias in, we might not get to the correct answer. And I'm going to talk about that in next week's video, because I see that a lot in the act utilitarian decision. You can tell from the very get-go that people want an answer to win, and they try to make it win in the first assignment. And it's not about that. It's not about, it's not a hypothesis like where you want to guess what the right answer is and prove yourself right the whole way. You want to go into this thing as like a blank slate and like let it come to you, the answer, through these theories, and then decide what the right thing to do is, okay? So let's try this out real quick. This is basically me walking you through the steps of this week's assignment, okay? So I've got a little situation here that I use in class that I got from Dr. Otatula a long time ago, and it works on a small level to kind of explain what we're doing. So this is where the infamous Bob from the assignment instructions comes from. So we have Bob. Bob has a wife, Mary, and they have a kid together, Timmy. Unfortunately, Mary has a boyfriend, Steve, and Bob's neighbor, George. He's a snitch. He thinks something's going on with Mary and Steve, and he told Bob. So now Bob is confronted with the information that his wife is having an affair with him. George comes over and says, hey, I don't know what's going on, but like every day when Timmy goes off to school, this guy comes over, he stays the whole day, and he leaves before you or Timmy comes back. And Bob was not aware of this. So now Bob's, it's coming to the forefront here that his wife is, doing something scandalous on him, okay? So this is our case. So in the identification, I'm looking to lay out a question. And so my question is, should Bob divorce his wife, or what should Bob do about his wife's cheating? Okay, either one of these would work for the case. I personally, like I said, I do the should question. That doesn't mean you can't do the other, but mine would be, should Bob divorce his wife? Okay. So in the research, 3 things, if I were Bob, I would look up is divorce law in Florida, because that's where I live, marriage counseling, and successive trial separation. So these would be my 3 research topics. And then all I would have to do is go write 3 to 4 sentences under each. I don't do that here because then you guys will just mimic my 3 to 4 sentences And that's not really what it's about, right? It's about you thinking through the process yourself. But this would be my step 2. I would list these 3 numbered in that bulleted list area. And then I would just put 3 to 4 sentences under each about where he would look up this information, what he would hope to find from this information, and how it would help him make a decision in the case. And then I'm ready for my analysis chart, okay? So step 3 is analysis, and that's when we have the chart. So here's an example of a chart, okay, that I have here. So I've got Bob as my decision maker. And then I've got Mary, I've got George, I've got the boyfriend, I've got Timmy. So I've got everybody that was laid out in the case that was mentioned as a decision maker. You can see here, even in this little simple case, I've got more than 4. So you're definitely going to have more than 4 in your case that's more complex than this. Now, what I've done across the top, Bob could do nothing. And sometimes the do nothing works, okay? Now, once they see the students want to always do nothing, and that may or may not work out for your case, because you have to think about what the do nothing is. So if they're already doing something, the do nothing would be continuing what they were already doing. So that'll be important, when we get to the deontological application. But remember I said do the thing or don't do the thing. So like divorcing the wife would be doing the thing. Do nothing would be not divorcing the wife. Obviously you could word that either way, but he doesn't have to leave his wife, or he doesn't even have to confront her or do anything. He could just decide, well, whatever, man, I'm gonna leave well enough alone and not do anything. And sometimes people do that. So he could do nothing. He could divorce his wife. He could ask his wife to go to counseling, and he could try separating from his wife. Now, these are reasonable things. I'm not going crazy nuclear options here. People always want to be funny and be like, oh, he could kill his wife. Yes, obviously killing his wife is a ethical decision he can make. Or, a decision he can make, but it's not going to be an ethical decision. So there's no point in putting on there. The whole point is we're thinking like ethicists. We want to think ethically, what are the wise, ethical, logical, reasonable, all those different adjectives that mean the same thing. What are the best 4 things he could try to do to solve that issue? Okay. And so these are realistic. These are all realistic things that any person would have to contemplate when they're confronted with infidelity in their relationship. And so what would the ethical theories compel Bob to do is what we're going to find out over the next 2 assignments. But I've got my decision maker labeled, I've got my stakeholders labeled and identified, and I've got my options laid out. All that there's left to do is fill in. Obviously, I'm not going to read each one of these. You could pause your screen or whatever if you want to take a look at it. But I'm just then going to fill in what I think is going to happen. Now, don't get too caught up in it. There is one problem to this process. It's very subjective because I'm trying to predict how other people feel. But that's the best I can do, right? I can't go ask each individual person, how would you feel this and how would you feel that? But what I can do is I can look at the context clues in the case, right? Which you guys go back and look at your case and see for each person, like what context clues do we have about what they may or may not want and how they may or may not feel. And then you fill in, each little box yourself, okay? And then once you do that, you're at the end of it. So you've done your 5 is it right questions. You've labeled your central ethical issue. You've laid out the 3 things you would research and talked about what you would gain from that, or the decision maker anyways. And then you listed this chart. Now, once you get to this chart, like I said, that's the end of the assignment. Double check everything, submit it. And then next week, the Act Utility application builds upon this chart, okay? So hopefully you guys will find that useful. So remember, take your quiz, okay? Read your case study, download your sample format, put it in the Dropbox. If you have any questions or anything about the assignment as you're going through it, please, I encourage you to reach out and ask. What's happening is a lot of people are, you guys are doing mostly pretty good on your assignments, but a lot of people are missing some things that after I score them, then they email me like, well, I wasn't sure what to do. Well, yeah, you're supposed to ask me first. And so don't let there be this weird, like barrier between us where you're afraid to ask the teacher because one, that's my job. I'm here to provide you guys guidance. But two, like I'm going to see that you didn't know it eventually, and I'm going to take off points. And like instead of running the gamble that I'll miss it or I won't take points off, just reach out and ask me and I'll clarify it for you. And then we'll make sure we get it right. Okay. Outside that, I hope you guys have a great week. If you need anything, I'm an email away. I look forward to, reading these applications. This is one of my favorite parts of the class, is actually teaching how we can make ethical decisions in the real world. That's why this class is called applied ethics and not just theoretical ethics, because we want to know that we can actually make ethical decisions. Okay. So again, have a great week. Reach out if you need anything. If not, I'll, see you again in a week with another video. Okay. You guys take care. How do I? All right.